We acknowledge that we are on indigenous territory that has never been ceded by way of treaty. We are in a place that is in the cradle of Haudenosaunee culture called Jujaege in Kanyega and Muniang in Anishinaabe, that has long been a place of encounter between First Nations. It is now also known as Montreal. This theater is built on land that has its own history since time immemorial, that already carries its own stories, rituals, and performances before colonization. We are grateful for the vitality and resurgence of the arts forms inherited from these practices, ageless practices. So welcome for this first keynote opening panel. We have as speakers Jacob Boehme, who is joining us online, who is the director of the Yirramboi Festival, Nayse López from Panorama Danza Festival, Quito Tembe from Kinani, Mozambique, Victoria Leshchenko from DocuDays in Ukraine, and Ellada and Evangelou from the Buffer Fringe Festival in Cyprus. So I hand the floor to Mike van Graan, who will facilitate this panel.
Yep, thank you very much, Inge. And maybe just before we do start, to acknowledge the presence of Tobile, who has now arrived from Durban, South Africa. Hey, Tobile, welcome. Yeah, so it might be a little bit weird to be starting a festival academy with the very existential question, like, do festivals need to continue to exist, right? But I think the last number of years, they've kind of shown us just the fragility of humankind itself. We've been faced with these existential kind of challenges, and with Russia's invasion of Ukraine as well, for the first time in a long time, we've had the very real threat of nuclear war. Climate change is something which we are very concerned about and have been concerned about, but in terms of its threat to humankind, it has a much longer kind of trajectory than what nuclear war does. We are so concerned about climate change, which is what we should be, and yet a nuclear war could eliminate all of humankind tomorrow. So here we are as human beings doing festivals. What does it mean to be doing a festival in the context of our world today? I think also, if one looks at the existential threats to the arts and to festivals themselves over the last number of years, festivals have been cancelled, curfews have restricted audiences, theatres have been shut, and there have been many deaths within the arts community as well. I was at an awards event in Johannesburg a couple of weeks ago, and normally at these annual awards events, one kind of commemorates the number of one's sector that might have passed on in the last year. And normally there may be about 20, 22 people. This time there was about 7 times that number of people who are no longer with us, people who were incredible leaders and practitioners within the sector. So the existential threat to our sector has been very significant. I think also the very fact that those of us who practice theatre and dance, we've been led to believe that the very definition of theatre and dance lies in the live encounter between that which happens on the stage and a live audience. And many of us have retreated to online platforms over the last 2 years. What does that say about the very definition of theatre and dance? Are we needing to rethink these things? Are we needing to rethink what festivals mean? And then just maybe as a final part of the introduction, the whole festival movement, the European Festival Association that arose out of the festival movement post-Second World War, was all about festivals kind of contributing to peaceful coexistence within Europe, making sure that war wouldn't originate in Europe again. And festivals were there as reminders of our common humanity and a celebration of our common kind of peaceful coexistence. And yet here we are, a war in the middle of Europe happening right now. So again, it raises the question, what is the purpose of festivals? Can festivals do the kinds of things that we say they can or should be doing? Is it too much of a burden to be placing on festivals, that they have to play a role beyond that which powers much more powerful than festivals can't achieve. So is it an unfair thing to demand of festivals that they play these kinds of roles? So these are some of the questions that we're going to be grappling with in this particular panel. We're going to be doing it in the following order. We'll ask Ellada, and then Jacob, who's, I think it's 7:30 in Australia at the moment, in the morning. It's tomorrow in Australia. So we have a voice from the future with us. And then Nayse will speak, and then Quito, and Victoria will end off, and she has a presentation to make. So, Ellada, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Ellada Evangelou, and thank you for the introduction, Mike. I'm part of the creative team of a festival in Nicosia, Cyprus called the Buffer Fringe Performing Arts Festival. So, important component in the name of the festival is buffer, insinuating that it stems from the buffer zone between the two sides in Cyprus, and the geography is important, what I'm going to speak about. And the other part is fringe, so basically allowing for of our artists to bring forth usually marginalized narratives onto artistic stages, so making that type of space. So relating to our existential question, I wanted to propose three ways, three reasons why I think we should stick around. So the first one has to do with space. So because of all these things that have occurred in the past few years and in the past few months, so COVID, war, more segregation, refugee crisis, transforming and continuing, I think that there has been a need to rethink how space happens, because I think that space happens to us. And just kind of to give you an example, in Cyprus, with the start of the pandemic, the checkpoints between the two communities closed before the airports closed. So following up to a very political decision, the artistic community and we, as part of that community, the Festival of the Fringes had to make a decision. So the decision was, do we continue or do we stop? The conscious decision that we made was that we would continue to organize the Buffer Fringe Festival 2020, which we decided that would take place. And we did also found the partners to be able to make this a hybrid festival. So we performed, as we always do every year, on both sides of the divide. Unfortunately omitting the buffer zone for 2020, but we did return in 21. But it was important to reaffirm how porous separating lines are, how porous borders are, and buffer zones between communities, and to continue to facilitate how people interact. My second point is about relationships and how those need to be rethought through this new lens of the pandemic and wars and continued separations. So distances have been redefined, especially through COVID. And we have as a community, and especially the artists, like the people that we work with, have developed new vulnerabilities because of how things have moved on in the world. And we think that a solution for that can be solidarity. So to create a new system whereby we change the way that we relate with artists, for more dialogue to come in, to find new mechanisms for us who make the space and the people that need to take the space to come together. And I'd like to give you another example from our festival. In 2020, and this also continued in 21 and also in the 22 version of the festival, we inaugurated a mechanism called the Thinking Partner Scheme. So Thinking Partners are international cultural agents that have come in to think with the artists, to think in the 2022 iteration, to think with us as organizers, to bring in new voices. So we do think that there need to be these types of new relationships that will connect people further and bring forth new dialogue. So intersectionality in this dialogue is also very important. The last, I think also very crucial element that should allow us to still exist is how youth and the digital element have come into our lives. Well, youth has always been around. We used to be them. But the digital element is what now comes into the existence of young people. So we have a physical life, and we also have online lives. So we are called upon, I think, as much as we would like to think that our arts are live arts, to reconsider this relationship and to dive in and to think about how online tools can help us to facilitate further social dialogue and allow new artists to emerge through this dialogue. So we haven't done very much in that aspect yet, but I do invite us to be more versatile also in our relationship with our funders, to make them understand that these new relationships do need harboring, and they also need the type of support that would allow for these things to happen. So, Mike, I think I hope I've convinced even a little bit that we should be sticking around, at least for another year. So thank you. Look forward to hearing everybody else.
Great. Thank you very much. It's the first day, so you're a very polite audience. Save your clapping for the end. Jacob, let's go on to you.
Okay, hold that thought. Yeah, good morning, afternoon. Can you all hear me? Yeah, great. My name's Jacob Boehme. Through my father, I belong to the Narangga and Graan peoples of South Australia, and also the Finnish people around Scandinavia. And from my mother, I get my heritage from the Irish and Scottish peoples of the United Kingdom. I was born and raised on Woiwurrung Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, where I call home. And I'm zooming in today from the lands of the Gadigal peoples in Sydney. So firstly, I'd like to pay my respects to the elders of Gadigal, the past and present. And I acknowledge that I'm sitting on unceded sovereign territories. And it always was and it always will be Aboriginal land. Firstly, I need to make a correction. I was the founding creative director of Yirramboi Festival. I no longer am with the festival, but I am now the director of First Nations programs at Carriage Works, which is Australia's largest multi-arts centre for contemporary and experimental arts. So yes, just making that correction there. I'd like to talk about the existential threat that is currently facing Indigenous peoples, Indigenous knowledge systems and ways of being, not only on my home soil, but applicable to First Nations communities around the world. I want to first talk about the threat to our cultures via the slow and consistent disappearance of our language for the preference of English, and of the threat to the heart of our culture, the ceremonies, the dances, the songs, the stories we tell, to make sense of the world around us, to affirm our identities, and to define how we belong to each other and our environment. I want to talk about stories relating to place and country, to the natural world, Indigenous ways of being and knowing that can influence our organisations, the ways in which we do business, and how we relate to each other as fellow human animals, not just as arts peers, colleagues, and competitors. So I want to tell you a little about the context from which I come from and the lineage that I belong to. Country, territory, place, land, home. These are what have fueled and have been the foundation of arts practices here on this continent for thousands of years. Some would say 60,000 years, others would say 80,000. The latest carbon dating suggests that we've had 120,000 years of continuous uninterrupted occupation of this land. It's a long time to be singing and dancing and telling stories on this country, of this country, and about this country. Thousands of years of artistic practice belong to these lands, stories told and retold, interpreted and reinterpreted by songmen and songwomen, generation after generation. Ways of telling stories and gathering communities and connecting individuals to nature and to each other. There is much to learn from the dances and songs that our songmen and women are guardians of. Astronomy, biology, water management, land care, botany, architecture, science, to name a few. And always your relationship to the land, to the natural world, to your community and broader family structures. And all of this in context to the past, the present, and then our collective futures. In performing and live art circles or academic institutions, we could probably call these ancient storytelling techniques theatre methodologies or dramaturgies, techniques that every Australian and next generation of theatre maker could and should learn from, that have originated right here and are older than any other known theatre practice in the world. I say methodologies and dramaturgies because each performance-making technique, or what we would call, in my language, Narangga language, Gurabanguja, or Inma from Central Desert, or Bongol from way up north, or what you might commonly know as ceremony or corroboree, is specific to and directly in alignment with its natural environment. There's a saying that has been passed down from our old people: if you look after the land will look after you. Meaning that if the land is sick, you are sick. If our waters are dying, then we are dying. This is not a simple quote from a simple people from a simpler time. Our forests are burning, our rivers are drying up or already dead. This is actually happening. And our current generation of youth already know this. They are leading the charge in the global environmental justice movement, and rightfully so. Our younger generations are panicked, fearful, and well aware of the repercussions that economic, social, and environmental policies and practices will have on climate change and their role in inheriting much of this damage. There is an opening sequence in Rolf de Heer's 10 Canoes. I don't know if any of you have seen the film. There is a group of Aboriginal men walking in single file in the bush. Now, this has been an ancient way of travelling country for millennia, multi-millennia. And it's a reminder of ways in which we, on the continent now known as Australia, have kept this environment pristine for over 1,000 generations. They walk in single file because we are taught to tread lightly on country, leave one set of footprints so as not to leave too much destruction in our path. At multiple times throughout the year, fire is used to burn off old growth and spur on new growth, to prevent firestorms in hotter months and to maintain an abundance of food supplies across our clan groups' expanded territories. We have law in the form of songs, dances, ceremonial and traditional justice systems that remind you to only take what you need. I bring up these few examples as potential ways in which we might look at how we shape the functions and systems of future arts organisations and festivals. Some of you may already be aware of this, but there is a concept that has come out of South America called buen vivir. Buen vivir is Spanish for good living or living well, and I apologise if I've massacred that language with my Australian accent. Its origins are based in ancestral concepts from the Andean regions of Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. Buen vivir is exactly the opposite to the Fairfax Lateral Economic Wellbeing Index, which puts a dollar figure on national wellbeing. With buen vivir, the subject of wellbeing is not the individual, but the individual within a community in relation to a specific cultural, natural environment. Buen vivir is decolonial in its stance, and it calls for new ethics that balances quality of life with biocentric ideals honouring the inherent value of all living things. Drawing on a wealth of Indigenous cultures from the Andes region, it has emerged as a lived practice against commodification and a way of doing things differently. Buen vivir is a new paradigm drawing from old knowledge that is community-centric, ecologically balanced, and culturally sensitive. It's a vision and a platform for thinking and practicing alternative futures based on bio-civilization, and has been adopted in the constitutions of Ecuador and Bolivia since 2008. So, from emergent philosophies coming from the Indigenous peoples in the Andes of South America, to ancient Aboriginal Australian knowledge systems 60 to 120,000 years old, there is ample opportunity to scope new partnerships between arts organisations, festivals, and business models with Indigenous peoples around the world using ancient knowledge systems, values, and trade practices to construct new common futures, which are sustainable, respectful of our environment, sensitive to our different climates, and secure the futures of our kin 7 generations from now. We can't have discussions about safety or climate justice or environmental action without the voices of the world's first peoples leading these conversations. So my provocation or invitation to you as you embark on this next couple of days of discussions is how might you and the communities that you belong to lead extraordinary change by doing what our governments won't, by truly acknowledging the sovereignty of Indigenous peoples around the world, and in doing so, honour and respect the ancient knowledge systems that have guided the custodianship of this planet for thousands of millennia, which has the potential to transform and reshape our business models, our relationship to practice, to trade, to each other, to our communities, and to our environments. What relationship do you have with your local Indigenous peoples? How are you making space for these conversations? What might a new future led by the wisdom of the world's Indigenous peoples look like? What change might that bring? And now, what do you need to do personally to start that change? Thank you.
Great. I know we said we'll save clapping for the end, but I think that deserves a great round of applause. Thank you very much, Jake. That was such an excellent provocation in terms of thinking about the existential threat to Indigenous people who at the same time can actually pose an alternative to humankind more broadly for the existential threats that we have brought upon ourselves. So thank you very much for that. Nayse.
Hi everyone, thank you. So is this working? Yes, you can hear me? Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share a bit of the questions that have been around my practice the last few years. I was going to start talking about another thing, but because of what Jacob said, I was thinking, because as you may know, I come from Brazil, and Brazil is a country that has a very, very violent history of genocide against the original people of Brazil. When we were invaded by the Portuguese, they kind of not only wiped out physically people that were living in the country, but they started the process that is still in place today to kind of ghost completely the presence of Indigenous people in the country. So we were taught in school, and of course I was in school during the dictatorship with a particularly bad time to be learning about history in school, but during my school years, there was no, I mean, Brazil was this forest that the Portuguese people discovered and brought us to light and gave us a civilization. That was how history was taught. And now, of course, archaeological research shows that we had something between 2 million and 8 million people in the Amazon alone living in my country when we were invaded. Of course, people think about the Amazon, for instance, as this big, thick forest where you have like scattered tribes, you know, and we have to give them opportunity to live, but they are completely fine by themselves, and they should be teaching us how to manage the Amazon instead of us going there and saying how they should live. But because of all this history, we have this kind of silencing of any other voices, especially in the artistic field. There are not white voices. And of course, my country, half of the population, more than half of the population of my country is black, descendant from the slaves that we had, that, you know, the nice people of Europe brought to us. And so the whole slavery system, that is something that if you are from a colony like I am, or Quito is, or Mike is, we know that the slavery issue is something that goes on in very structural ways into the arts world, because you see today how a country like mine could, in 2022, have probably like a handful of institutions in the art in the whole country led by black people. while the black people are more than half of the population. So not to mention indigenous people, because they, of course they don't exist, basically. And very recently, they started to be artists that were in fashion for the biennals, the arts biennals, and all these things. And because of that recent fashion about indigenous people being, you know, kind of the new wave, you know, the left people kind of discovered that we had indigenous people that could write books recently. So we have a whole generation of artists that now, you know, completely, you know, are totally devoted to artists, to indigenous artists, like they just started 5 years ago. But there's one guy that I want to say something that he said that I think relates to what Jacob is saying. There is a writer in Brazil called Ailton Krenak. He comes from the Krenak nation, which is a nation that is from the middle part of Brazil, a part that has been hardly hit by disasters coming out of the mining industry. So the mining industry in this part of my country completely destroyed two important rivers. One of these rivers, essential river to many communities of this area. And of course, the media covered this story as a natural disaster. It's basically a mining explosion. I mean, it's a barrier of a mine that collapsed and covered 3 cities and killed hundreds of people as a result of malpractice in the mining industry. And they went to this guy to interview him because he's from this area and he's very famous. And he's been very important for many, many years. But at some point they asked him, why, so you have to fight 2 fronts now as an indigenous leader, because you have to fight the mining that is going over your land, and you have to fight this government, because our government at this moment, the president of Brazil, is against indigenous people openly. It's not, if you say, he will say in interviews like, I am against any indigenous land. This is absurd. They are Brazilians, they should be, you know, working, they don't want to work, this kind of discourse. So they have to fight these 2 fronts to survive now. And of course the mining, not only carbon, but coal, but diamonds and things, well, you know the drill. So somebody came to Ailton Krenak and asked him, how do you plan to fight the current situation against indigenous people? And he answered, the same way we've been doing it for 500 years. From our perspective, there's nothing new. The crisis and the war on us hasn't started 10 years ago. It has, with the climate awareness, it has started 5 years ago when some people came here and started killing us and the colonial process became. So for me, I think when we think about festivals in existential crisis, I was thinking back to what I was planning to say before, which was this concept of a Brazilian geographist called Milton Santos, an amazing person to think about globalization many, many years ago. And there is this book of him from 20 years ago where, well, I'm celebrating 30 years of my festival this year, so I'm going through archives. So I'm a bit memory lane kind of vibe now, but so I'll share some of these thoughts. So in this book, 20 years ago, you have to remember 20 years ago, we barely had internet, people. You remember, the older ones? The sound of a fax machine, you remember? Sending the contract to the artist by fax machine. So we were in that moment of globalization where Milton Santos wrote that depending on where you are in the world, crisis is not something that happens, crisis is the system. And for me, it resonates a lot what we are talking, and I think it's a lot to do with some of the realities that are represented here in this group, because it's very, for me, has always been very, well, funny, to say the least, when I go to events in Europe, for instance, especially Western Europe, where, as you know, has a lot of money for culture, and very old institutions, like this building that you go and we photographed. It's been here for 120-something years, this building, as a theater place. Like, how come? So for us, the idea that a cultural institution has 100 years is in itself like a a metaphor maybe. I don't know. It's not real. So for me, the situation is that we cannot be in an existential crisis now because being in crisis is our way of living. And the way that our societies were built, because if you come from a place that was built on invasion, genocide, rape, and slavery, there's nothing that can come from that society that is not in itself an existential crisis. Why are we here? How we deal with this past? How we construct something that acknowledges this past and is able to build something else. So festivals and arts in general, I think in places like Brazil, have to have that in their core. Otherwise, it's entertainment, which is fine because I love to go to some place and don't think about the 500 shit years that Brazil had to go through to be there, to be now. But you know, I have to. For me, it's very clear that the roles that festivals can play, in the sense that they have kind of a suspended time in reality. They are not your normal life where you plan your week and you go to the cinema or to the theater on Saturday. It's a suspended place where people get together and kind of cross around a lot of intense ideas. And this place can be the place to remember people about all of those things. So to leave you with some very quick stories from this 30 years that this festival exists. This festival that I run for 20 years, but it existed 10 years before me, it was created by an artist, which is a very different kind of festival than other kinds of festivals. Festivals that were created by the need of a group of artists to be in contact with the audience when there is nothing else, no funding, no, at that point in 1992, when Lia started this festival, Lia Rodrigues, a choreographer that many of you know, when Lia and João Saldanha started this festival, there's nothing. There was no funding for culture whatsoever in Brazil. It was the year that we impeached for corruption the first democratically elected president after 34 years of dictatorship. So it's not an easy place to find funding for culture. It is not now, it was not then. So they started this festival as just a group of artists going into a theater and showing their works. And when I started working for this festival as an invited curator, we went to a funding meeting with the mayor of the city, or not the mayor, the secretary of culture of the city. That since the beginning was the only funding that the festival had. And we went into this meeting, and this guy started saying all the bullshit that you normally hear, but this time he was very like, I don't know if I want to give money to this festival because I don't know. I don't feel like this festival represents the city. It's too dark and it's too political. It's too radical, this kind of bullshit. And I was very young, and I was listening to this and thinking, I want to kill this bitch. But I was like, I can't say anything. And Lia, and people who crossed Lia in their lives, they know how Lia is. And Lia was sitting like, she's like a monk. And she was like this, and the guy was saying things. And at the final, when he finished, Lia said, it was like 1 month before the festival, we went there to complain that the money was not yet there. And Lia looked at this guy and she said, you know what? I'm firing you from my festival. You cannot be part of my festival. You don't know enough, you're not prepared. You're not good enough to be in the same team, like signing one of the pages of my program. You're just a bad person. You cannot be in our festival. And I was like, oh my God. And he was like, what? And she said, you can give me the money, but I won't put your name in anything because I'm ashamed of putting your name in the festival. And the guy, of course, said, then there is no money. And we said, okay, and we left. And we went into the taxi, very silent. And at some point in the ride, I said, Lia, you know that there is no other money. and she didn't look at me. She was looking outside, and she said, well, there's only two things that can happen. Either this festival is important, and we'll find a way, or it doesn't matter, and it won't happen anymore. There's only two things that can happen here. And of course, after a week, we got calls because we started saying to people that he cut our budget, and we got calls and we got funding, and the festival exists until today. And Eduardo Bonito was my co-director for 15 years after Lia left the festival and asked us to take on the festival in 2005. And every year I was desperate, like 3 months before. There was no funding because there was no funding 3 months before. So I was desperate, like, Eduardo, we cannot sign this thing. We're signing a contract with the company saying that we're going to pay for this. We're paying freight. We have no money. And at some point, he came to me and said, can you stop doing this? And I'm like, doing what? Being realistic. I said, yeah, but you have to consider the statistics. He's a very practical person. I have to finish. And he said, he said to me, every year we have no money. Every year we think it's not going to happen. And it's 25 years already. This is how it's supposed to happen here. So this, to wrap up, is, for me, of course, we come from a very privileged white position in my country. The people that run this festival have historically been white people running this festival. But I have to say that we cannot be in crisis when crisis is our reality. And we have to stop treating threats to our existence as something new. Because as Aboriginal people has taught us, as Indigenous people have taught, this is how the system works. And it's like the meme, people. You know the meme where this guy is very, like, run down, and it says, it's not Monday, it's capitalism? It's the same, you know? So we have to stick around and remember, it's not Monday, it's capitalism.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So an existential crisis to a festival is the very foundation for sustainability, is basically what you're saying. Thank you very much for that very passionate kind of contribution, Nayse. Over to you, Quito.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, for those who just arrived, my name is Quito, and running a festival in Maputo, Mozambique, called Kinani. The first time when I saw this invitation to come here to speak about crisis and festivals in times of crisis, I realized that, you know, perhaps you guys it doesn't understand. Sorry for my bad English. Sometimes you should remind me if I speak in English. But if I speak in Portuguese, actually, because I'm thinking in Portuguese and I deliver in English. So let's do this exercise. Yeah. When I get this invitation to be here, to get this privilege, actually, it's a privilege for me to be here in this panel with those wonderful people that I admire for years and years. And I be in Panorama as a technician 20 years ago, as a light designer with one company from Mozambique, and now sitting here with the director of this festival. So imagine for you how privileged it is for me to be sitting here and also to be sharing this moment with you, with these amazing festivals that you guys running, amazing ideas that I be reading, that I look forward to diving into this project that you guys you gotta offer for those days. To be back on the story, to come here and to accept to be here, I ask myself, all those guys that invite me, they don't understand what it is to make a festival in Africa. Like, seriously. Yeah. Why you want me to come to talk about crisis, about COVID, about climate change, about wars that's starting now? Because doing a festival in Africa and do what we do, it's completely in crisis since the beginning. Up now, it's pure crisis. So we deal with constant crisis. Like, just to start to think to put a festival, the first question is why? Why we should do a festival in our context, in our society? In the end, you challenge yourself with what I call constantly crisis. I'm not talking about climate change, either COVID, either, I don't want to dive more because the crisis around the world is becoming so diverse. But I'm talking about basic things in our context. It's like, why we do a festival? First of all, We have got artists for that, to make a festival make sense, and our contest, second. We've got technicians that understand how to create a piece. Second, who are the professionals to work in the festival? So those all the questions is putting you in the position to say, you know what, no, I cannot do this. You know, forget, because it's so much challenging. But in the meantime, back to our topic, I think I learned all the 20 years that challenge make you make some difference in the world and the society that you are. So to say that challenge all those crises that we deal with that, it puts us in a position, in a privileged position to be sitting here with those people and with you guys. That meaning that we use those challenges not to sit on top of them, but in the meantime, how we find the solutions for those crises, for those challenges to make a festival and the contest of Constantin Christ is to shift the mentality, is to use the Christ and to use what we say is not possible to make possible. Before, when I beginning to do a curator and a curate a festival, and always when someone asks, what's your role or what you do, I present myself like I'm light designer, I'm a scenographer, I dancing, an actor, and I don't know, I've got like 7 titles. But I realized that with all those 7 titles, I'm not involved or in, how can I say this in English? I'm not part of any of those communities, 7. It's like, okay, great, bye-bye. But when I start to focus myself, look, no, I gotta use all those tools to becoming something, to make a difference. It's great. Let's make something. Quito, if you ask me today what you're doing, I just give you 1 title because I'm more focused. It's exactly what also we be doing with our festivals. We cannot solve all the problems that we challenge, but we focus each edition, let's say 2 in 2 years, we focus to 1 challenge. Before the challenges be, what is our audience? And now it's very nice to hear that we should link to our indigenous people. No, we are the indigenous people and my contest. So, but how we can make a festival to becoming our festival, not a festival in our country for others. So, doesn't mean focus to our local contest and focus to 1 purpose, to take the festival to belong to us as a local, as indigenous. And also to challenge ourselves how we can deliver in the same higher professional festival that we see around the world, but in our contests, with our resource, with our human resource, to build something that it's not look like Tanzania or Panorama, but it's but we put this, our festival or our products, and the level that we say, look, we don't go to becoming like those ones, but we show you something that is very rich, because it's doing with the local, and all the resources, the technical and all the production, everything is local. So you feel that this festival belongs to the local guys. So to wrap up, I've got a lot to say, but I know the mic is gonna put a beep.
He beeped me out like a
Yeah. Just to wrap it up, to say that for me, deal with these topics and put ourselves to deal with global crisis is to say, oh, okay, so now we start to talk the same language. We start to deal and to discussing and to dive to find a global solutions. So for me, the privilege to be here with you guys, it's also to not to sharing, because I don't have a solution for global problems, but also to sharing how to deal with the crisis, because it's what I've been doing for 20 years. Thank you so much.
I thought we invited him because he had a solution for global crisis. Thank you very much for that, Quito. Victoria, your presentation, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. I actually, when I was invited to give this talk, I basically received this, description that it should be like inspiration talk, and back then and still I was like, oh my God, I just can't find this inspiration just at all, because like really the situation in the Ukraine is now such that you're really kind of frustrated, and everything that you've been doing like for many, many years, actually you really don't understand, the final result of it. And actually you kind of also disappointed in a way, because if you did such a huge, great job, like doing film festival and actually empowering other people and like basically providing new generations with a lot of great films and insights and everything, and it just ended in this way. Maybe we did something wrong. So I prepared like a very classical presentation, but now I think that I really maybe we'll skip it and we'll just maybe tell a bit about our festival, about myself. My name is Vika. I spent almost 11 years of my life doing film festivals in Ukraine. So I'm really like a film festival activist and a big fan of this movement. And I started like right after university. Basically, my background, I came from a family of Russian-speaking Ukrainians, those Ukrainians whom Russians now they are trying to save, let's say. And when I was a small child, I was diagnosed by myopia. So the doctors actually, they said my mom basically she forbid me to watch movies, and films. I was allowed to watch like only two cartoons per week, and that was it. And that was for a long, long time. Actually, I missed a lot of films that other children of my age managed to watch. And first time I actually met cinema, like in films, that was already in university. And that's maybe why I think it's kind of compensation to all this experience that after university, I basically joined the film festival team. And the first festival was Molodis Film Festival, which is a huge international feature festival in Ukraine. And then after some years, I joined a documentary film festival, DocuDays UA, which is a festival of, it's an international documentary film festival, but also human rights film festival. And when I joined the team, I was super inspired because it was started actually as an initiative of filmmakers, because back then it was something like 2010, we don't have much space, to actually to watch documentaries, but also to screen documentaries, because my friends and my colleagues, they were Ukrainian filmmakers, and they want to create basically to space to show their films to their friends and colleagues, and also to watch some nice, great documentaries from other countries. So basically that was an idea of the festival, and that's how it was started. And I joined, it was started in 2003, and I joined later. And basically, I was never a filmmaker myself. I was just a cultural activist and person doing film festivals. And what we've been doing this year is we basically started doing film festival from scratch. So we didn't have any knowledge how to do things back then. I had a very basic experience from doing Maldives Film Festival, and we started just also attending other international film festivals, just trying to see how people do things, and then we slowly, step by step, we started to develop our own project, and really we achieved to create a great international event. Now we have 20,000 people normally attending a film festival in Kiev, which we used to have every last week of March. Basically, it was already 18th edition of the festival. 19th edition was supposed to be this year. Unfortunately, it was paused. And the next year it will be 20th edition, hopefully. Yeah, and during those years, basically we started as a grassroots initiative, and we started as an audience film festival, and we basically now transforming into institution. Some years ago, we got a huge institutional grant, and also we are now not only audience festival, of course, we support a lot of Ukrainian film industry. That's also a big huge idea about the festival. So we support our people, support Ukrainian filmmakers, we screen Ukrainian documentaries, we invite them, we create educational industry programs. About 5 years ago, we started also traveling to other film festivals and bringing delegations of Ukrainian filmmakers to other film festivals, to IDFA, to Neon, to Leipzig. And also why we started doing this, because there was no any kind of institution doing that. So we didn't have any film institute in Ukraine like other countries normally they have. So we started just doing everything by ourselves. And that was 10 years of very productive time. And I would say that closer to the lockdown, we have already a bit, we had a bit tired already. I had my own disappointment about the festivals and everything. And then lockdown happened, which was also, we were almost prepared for a festival, and then it was cancelled, I think 1 week before festival something, because of lockdown, everything closed. And I remember the first was big, huge shock, because we are really professional. We always managed to do festival no matter what. And then finally, we took a pause in the months. We did create online festival, basically create online TV, create online cinema, and we did all really with a team of few people. And that was of a huge success, and basically the first online festival of this kind happening in Ukraine in that year. And so I think that was also a great thing. Basically, this crisis gave us a new start and a new energy, and all this of the festival was very happy, because they were all sitting home, frustrated, and suddenly they had a chance to get to be with their favorite festival, even watching it on their laptops. So it was a huge kind of renaissance in 2020. And in 2021, we also did online and hybrid festival. And this year we've been preparing finally offline festival. We were looking forward to it, because it's 2 years we spent online, in exile. And then just months before we were in active space preparations, and then the war started. And we have to pause the festival basically, and that of course became, I think, the biggest crisis actually we ever had during our 10 years. I really can't compare anything to that, because no matter what happened, we always find a way how to deal with that. but you don't know how to do with the words. It's something which our generation definitely never expected to happen. You know, we were not really, I mean, we were traveling abroad, we were doing a really international festival. We never thought that it's something which actually is possible. And it's true that now, like, I don't have an answer, you know, what we're going to do. It's still an open question. Maybe we'll do a festival finally this year, maybe we'll do it next year, but the most important thing, you can't plan this anymore. You're like diving in the pool of uncertainty, and you can try to plan things, but you should be ready that any time, any moment, this can be cancelled or changed or anything. And this is a really open question now, what we're going to do. So I don't know if I can bring much inspiration there, but I also think that like maybe this crisis is also a way to find, you know, a new way how to do the festival. Maybe it will bring us energy, bring something. At the moment, it's obvious that people in Ukraine, they are very frustrated, but they're also waiting for this kind of events to happen. So that could be a place of solidarity and a place of, you know, which can help them also to have this feeling that they still can have normal life in a way. So that's pretty much what I can share at the moment. And I think film festivals, I mean, it's something really important, and we need to go on no matter really what. And I really hope that this will be possible also in Ukraine soon.
Great, thank you. Just a question of clarity quickly, Victoria. Your festival is a festival of human rights films, and there are films that are made about human rights globally, or are they specific to Eastern Europe and Ukraine?
We are faced a film festival about human rights, but this is a very, I mean, it's not only about films. So we do have like film programs, which are of course connected to human rights. We have connected discussions, but basically the theme of the festival is also, we have like a team of human rights colleagues who are doing a separate program. So normally they do like a hub during the festival, you know, it's like discussions, panels, meetings, like whatever. It's not only about films. So we can, and sometimes film screening is not necessarily about human rights, because, you know, it's basically the theme of the festival, it's a collaboration of filmmakers, human rights activists, you know, culture managers. So it's very big. And like we try not to, like we were always pretty much international film festival. I mean, we discuss local issues and Ukrainian stuff, and the human rights program was definitely connected to local, like human rights context. But that wasn't the only, like, you know, focus of the festival. So basically, it was always very wide, and I can't say that we were only strictly focused on human rights things. So it's an important part of the festival, but we are much bigger than that, obviously. So we have a huge industrial parts, film industry parts, and really big festival program normally, and also lots of like side events such as traveling film festival all over the country, a network of film clubs, which is about, you know, like 500 film clubs all over the country, and that's activities which we're running during the year. So it's I would say, if I can describe festival, this is really like a huge hub. And basically now we are also NGO. So we are not only doing film festival, but yes, we are also doing human rights campaigns, yes, and educational projects, and lots of this kind. At the moment also we oppose the festival, but we do three things now. Basically, we do culture diplomacy, so we do a lot of Ukrainians abroad, and some panel sessions explaining actually the situation with Russia and explaining why we are actually support as like a cancel of Russian culture, they call it. We explain what is the situation of Ukrainian culture and why we are now, it's so important for us to talk about the influence of Russian culture and all this colonial influence of Russian culture in Soviet Union as well. And it's the one biggest thing we are doing, and also we support Ukrainian filmmakers because many of them still make, like they're still in Ukraine. They are not just shooting films, many of them just volunteering, because it's really hard to be filmmaker in country at war. So we create a fund, basically any person can, donate to this fund, and then we provide filmmakers with very basic grants, so they can buy equipment or maybe some protection or fuel, which is quite expensive now, and so on. And the third thing we are doing is our human rights team. They now create an online platform. They call it Encyclopedia of War, and they collect. So this will be a platform for all, which will be a collection of videos about the war. So basically, any person, anybody can send, the videos documenting some crimes committed by Russians or some improvements or any videos, basically, and our team will create those videos and will also check it, tag it, and then locate in this library. And this library will be actually a place for professionals to get this information and videos for different courses. That's like three things which we are now doing right at the moment during these 2 months, let's say, of war.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, folk, we'd like to open it up to the floor for questions, comments that you have of the panelists, anything that kind of resonates with you. Yep. Go for it.
This is more just open for discussion in the next week, but maybe I'll stand up.
Can you tell us your name?
Oh, sorry. My name is, you probably all know it by now. But for on the Zoom, I'm Anna from St. John's, Newfoundland. And we put together also panels at our festival, and it's a big part of it. And I guess my struggle sometimes is to address issues, but still feeling like you're motivational and inspirational and not making it heavy, feeling like people need lightness. And so it's something that I'm constantly trying to find that balance of actually being authentic and talking about it, not having that pink elephant in the room, but how to do it in a way that we inspire, And I had a great example last year. We were putting together the panels, and I had one person's voice that I really wanted, Philippine, beautiful, gay artist, and he said, Anna, if you want something positive, everything's shit right now. Everything that I do is shit. I think the way that we're treated. And I said, well, to Carol, I don't know if I want that voice on the panel, but then I realized that's exactly the voice I need. And he ended up being the most inspirational person of the whole panel. So that was a big lesson to me, because after I really struggled with it, I'm like, I can't tell him to pretend he's something else, because actually what I need is that voice. And he ended up being actually not as negative as I thought. And so I wanted to share that, but I'm still struggling even this year to go, what can we address?
Can you just hold the mic closer to your mouth?
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
No,
anyway, I'm rambling on a bit now, but that's just a point of discussion that I'd be really excited to have.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Sure. Josh.
As someone who is a presenter of Eastern European folk music and art in Toronto, hi Victoria, I have been, we are always dealing with the heaviness of the topics that we are addressing, and in order to respect these, we try to create these, we create these spaces, but if you actually listen to the people who are there in the front, you find that what is surviving and what is maintaining them through these struggles is a sense of humor about the situation and a sense of lightness that we don't have when we approach the situation. For example, like I have a housemate, this guy Volo, who we did a theater piece many years ago about the 2014 Ukrainian revolution, and we toured it around the world. And now he was going to be finishing a university course in Kharkiv this month, actually like last week. And instead he is helping his family, and he's working, getting supplies over there. And every time I speak with him, he just addresses me. He's like, "Hey man, I hope you're not too stressed out these days." Like, his sense of humor and his level of lightness is a lot more than I would expect. And I think that is what is helping sustain people through these conflicts, and I think we need to listen to them rather than trying to apply our own difficult, emotions on these situations. So that's what I wanted to say.
Sure. I was going to ask, Ellada, we're talking about the existential crises facing festivals, but festivals also addressing existential crises that we are facing. But festivals are almost by definition quite limited in terms of time. So they might happen between 7 or 10 days, 3 days. How does a festival kind of address some of the existential crises that humankind is encountering by virtue of its own limitations?
So you're right, it is very limited, but basically it's that the process of building towards something and having a focus with a group of people is something that can be very liberating. So you are for months on end kind of in a constant process to fine-tune everything to make it perfect for those 3 days. And a lot of the times we kind of lose sight of the process. So there's this very kind of famous poem by this Alexandrian Greek poet called Kavafis, and he talks about the road to Ithaca. So it took Ulysses years and years, and the road was as important as reaching, right? So I think that a lot of the quality of the work is en route. It's on the way. It's kind of going in depth in relationships and having real conversations, and kind of facing the challenges in a truthful an honest way. And when it doesn't work, also to acknowledge it and be like, okay, fine, maybe I just need to move on from this one. So the route is very important, and we do need to make time for that. It's wonderful when we get to share it with an audience, and audience development, super important. But I think from our vantage points, what matters is the time that we give to have that extra Zoom or coffee with an artist, to kind of make sure that our technicians are, kind of in sync with us, and, that we are all sharing a vision and helping develop that vision. So I'm a big fan of the journey, and that's kind of also, I think, the big sustainability, it really does, it gives the quality to that long-term vision. The relationships are what will stay at the end.
Nayse, you wanted to comment?
I want to pick up on something that you said before, not to move away from the dark matters that we have in hand, but just to say that as we know, we can be here hours talking about all the crises and wars that we are facing now. And just before I move to the other subject, I would like to just remember, or rather remind everyone that frontal tank wars are a tragedy, but they are not the only wars that we are facing at this moment in the world, which we tend to address more because the media addresses that more. But we have to remember that when we think about the numbers of people being killed for other reasons, that our crises in this world are appalling. And all the time, when we live when you live in a place like I live, that we have so many people killed every day by the police, Sometimes it's hard for us to not be angry at the media because, to see the Brazilian media, for instance, to set up whole, central of war to cover Ukraine or to cover any other crisis that is arousing in the world, and we look at our numbers and we are losing 47 to 48,000 people, mostly black young men, to the police every year. This is not a decade of police killings in my country. It's a year of police killings. So it's other kinds of crises that we have to face as festivals that are operating in the society that also have to be somewhat addressed in our practices. But I wanted to talk about another existential crisis, not related to the death of people, which is, you talked about something very important, is the technology aspect that the pandemic brought us. Because for me, one of the crises that I feel we face as festivals, especially performing arts festivals, maybe the film-related festivals are less concerned about that crisis specifically. But in our case, for me, it has to do with the crisis of presence. Because we are a presence-related art form, or at least traditionally we were thought to be. And when you look at the reality of younger audiences, for instance, when you divide, for instance, projects, and I did the same now because I did an online version of my festival last year, the Raft project, which maybe there's somebody from the FTA here. The FTA is one of the partners of this project. But you talk about the digital and the live experience. And I think for younger audience, that division is not longer the case in most aspects of their lives. If you talk to teenagers, they won't divide their lives between specifically what is live, what is digital, because it's very hard to say that what's happening inside your phone, in your bed with you, is not live, or whatever is happening in your, something that you do 10 hours a day cannot be something that is out of your life like we used to think. So for me, another existential crisis of festivals, because we are born from this idea of festivity, of celebration, of getting together, and so many good, we could quote, hundreds of beautiful quotes about the importance of being together, but being together for us in the 80s, when we were 20, is not the same as being together for people that are 20 now. And it certainly is not going to be the same thing as being together for someone that is 14 now, or my son that is 8. So, because my son is together with his friends on Roblox. They are together, they talk to each other, they feel like they are together. They are playing a video game, or any of my nephews also. So, to say that we have to also rethink what is presence. And when we did the Raft project this last year, and when we did last month a discussion about the future of festivals in Portugal, Quito was one of the guests of this conference that I organized by invitation of the DDD festival in Porto. And I asked artists from the Raft project, because they were challenged to create online projects for international viewing, to talk about issues about sustainability and the future of festivals. And Alejandro Ahmed is a Brazilian choreographer, deals with technology for a long time, is a brilliant choreographer. And he did a video where he asked this question. Like, I was forced to go further into my research about what is presence. Because I did a piece, and he did a piece, which is a live piece for the ones watching it live. And it is an online piece, a different one, because he does it in a way that if you see it from your home, is a whole other piece than the piece people saw live. But they are at the same piece, but made differently for different audiences, experiencing it completely differently. So the idea that we also have to think festivals have to be a group of people that are together in the same place at the same time during 10 days, maybe that's not the only format possible.
Well, that goes to the definition of a festival then.
Yes.
As consumers' habits kind of change because of a whole range of reasons, we then need to be questioning, are the traditional ways in which we've been trying to reach those markets the best ways of doing so?
Yeah.
And how do we need to shift in the way that we do things? So, Tobila, I'll come to you now. I just wanted to ask Jacob a question. Jacob, the marginalization of indigenous knowledge and of indigenous people kind of requires that First Nations people have their own gatherings and festivals to affirm who they are, to affirm their languages, to affirm their cultural practices, to affirm their artistic forms and the like. So there's that work needs to be done on the one hand, and yet on the other hand, you were saying it's very necessary for the ways in which indigenous knowledge can impact positively on societies more broadly. There needs to be an upscaling of that indigenous knowledge and an integration of that into education systems, in the way that politics gets done and the like. How do you do that? How do you, on the one hand, kind of affirm and celebrate people who have been marginalized, at the same time seek to popularize what has been marginalized historically?
Thank you. And you've asked me the question just as the garbage men come and do all the bins. So sorry for the noise in the background. It's that time of the morning. All right, so yeah, look, what I'm talking about is, there is twofold here. And I think what I'm talking about is all of us looking at Indigenous ways of knowing and being as ways in which we can start looking at business models, operations, in terms of changing the nature of the transaction. Because what Ellada is talking about is relationships. You keep coming back to relationships. Festivals, regardless of how long they are, regardless of in what part of the town they take place, regardless of whether they're transient or stationary, it's a conversation and it's a relationship with a community that is continuous, hopefully, and ongoing. However, what remains in the nature of festivals and a presentation is it's purely transactional. We like to shift product. I think Nayse said something about it's not Monday, it's capitalism. We keep looking at art and artists and creative genius as just product, and we shift it. So we need to start flipping the nature of the transaction, the nature of our relationship with the artist, the nature of our relationship with the form, the nature of our relationship with audiences and communities and the discussions that we are wanting to have. So when the festival is over, what is it that we're talking about? What I'm talking about is things looking at, like I don't know if any of you know what a songline is. Have you heard of songlines before? So songlines in Australia, these are rather important parts of our community, our culture. A songline basically, I'm going to try and describe this so that you understand. It's quite complex in its nature. Okay, if you think of an epic poem, right? But it's an epic poem that stretches right across the country. And my community will have the first chapter of that poem and we will sing it. And then Victoria's community will have a chapter of the next chapter of that poem. And Victoria's community will sing and dance that. And then Quito's community will have the next chapter of that. So this epic poem is the thing that unites us all together. It describes the land that we all belong to. And then it can, in Australia, which is rather large, it can span all the way from the south all the way to the north, where you've got you've got cold climates, you go through desert, then you go up into rainforest. And all of those songlines describe the different climates, the different environments, how they came about, and how you belong to them, and then how you belong to the next community, how I belong to Victoria's community, which is next to mine. And that also forms a trade route. So then not only do we share the same songs and dances, but we also have a link through trade. And so what we do there is we use that opportunity to sing and dance to exchange resources, the resources that you have that we don't. And that's an exchange, and it's an ongoing conversation, because not only does that happen, but we start to exchange language. We start to influence each other's dance. We start to influence each other's songs. And so that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at. How would it look like if you took the traditional Aboriginal framework of a songline and applied it to a business model for a festival?
And how do you do that? have
That's
you?
my question.
Yeah. Okay. Tobile?
Because then, but what you need to do then is you need to look at the relationships, as Ellada keeps talking about. Because once you do that, once you're part of a songline, that means that you have familial obligations. It's no longer a transaction. It is a responsibility, and it is a lifelong responsibility. So you're not just asking an artist to come in, show their wares and piss off again. It's like, what's your relationship with that artist over time? What is that artist's relationship with your community over time? And what does that discussion become? Rather than just a 7 to 10 day, we're going to have a few panels and then it's over.
Okay, thanks very much. Jacob, Tobile, you had a question.
I did, but I think it's kind of been answered, and so I'm going to ramble until I find something to say. Hi, everybody, and I'm sorry to be late. But I really like the conversation that's happening around this idea of presence, indigenous knowledge systems, festivals for the people. But then I kind of, or at least in my context, what I often struggle with is that we are so, as the continent of Africa, as South Africa itself, we're so rich within our indigenous art forms, our ability to just be. But it's almost like it's a thing that's undervalued. And I think that's definitely a colonial thing, is that we have been undervalued and we have been taught to think that anything that is not of us is better. And what I wonder, as we have this conversation about creating festivals for ourselves and trying to think of them like the songline, which is an awesome idea, but how do you get people to buy in, right? So as somebody who works for the Jomba Festival in Durban, contemporary dance is a very hard thing to even try define to people who are in the arts, let alone people who don't see theater or anything like that. For me, contemporary dance is such a vital way of communication. It is my personal way of expressing myself and also just negotiating my own life, my own identity, my own traumas and stuff like that. A very good friend of mine likes to say, we're constantly in this process of what is dance, and she's a contemporary dancer herself, but she's also said, like, contemporary dancers are exercising their trauma on their audiences, which in a way we are, you know, that's what we do. And for me, I ask, why is that problematic? Because we are traumatized people, like we are saying right now, that we live in a perpetual state of crisis, that to think of ourselves in this moment as existential or whatever the case is, it's not a now thing, it's a continuous thing, and it's a thing that we'll be in for a very long time. So what is wrong with Mamela Nyamza coming and dealing with her childhood trauma in front of our eyes so as to help her recover or find healing, but also allow whoever's sitting in that audience to acknowledge that it's okay to acknowledge your own. How do we get more people to do that, though? Because I think that's the problem, right? Is it's not, we're speaking to each other because we're all the people that are doing it. For me, is how do we translate this to the guy on the street? And in South Africa, the guy on the street would rather go and watch a movie than come and sit and watch a performance piece created by somebody who looks like them, or about a story that, you know, we've got this amazingly famous storyteller in KwaZulu-Natal, Umamgcina, and she tells these ancient stories that are fabulous, but also they're not like realistic, but there are fables of Africa that teach knowledge, and they do everything that you guys have said. But when I was growing up, I only got access to her because I went to a nice, privileged private school, and they acknowledged her, and that's why she has become somebody I know. Whereas there are kids today growing up in townships or in rural areas who don't know of her. So I guess the question is that I love what we're talking about, And I think it's true, is that it is a process. I love what you said. It's not a thing of getting to a festival, and a festival should prove as an output of some sort, but it should begin conversations and it should open conversations. But how do we get more people involved in those conversations, and people who are outside of art as we think of it as this elite thing, you know?
Billy, and I think that what you're also raising as a question, again, in our particular context, and one of the things that has happened over the last number of years is obviously we're trying to bring into these kinds of forums conversations with people from a wide variety of contexts, right? So some of the questions that we are dealing with might not be peculiar to your particular context, but they are relevant, and there might be things that you will be able to gain from the discussions that happen around it. So in terms of what you are asking, I wanted to go back to a question to Quito, because one of the reasons why people might not access Jomba dance or whatever is that we also have other kinds of things happening in our country, like a 35% unemployment rate, like 55% of the people live below the poverty line. So people are not natural markets for the kinds of things that we do as artists or want them to come and experience. Your festival, Quito, is funded essentially by international donors. So that's one of the other kinds of challenges of doing a festival on our continent in many ways. It's that our own governments or private sectors don't support the work that is done within that particular context. But what does that mean for you in terms of the existential, longevity of your festival? If an international funder decides to withdraw because there's another issue, they want to go and support Ukraine, what does it do for your festival? Or how do they impact on the aesthetic choices that you make?
It's a really nice question into the topic of the crisis, because as I say in the beginning, it's exactly challenge all those questions. And fund, it's one of the questions. It's not just about cut the fund. For me, the most difficult moment that we had in our festival is how I put the funders to dance our music, not we dance the music of the funders. Because it's always about, I can support you, but the rules, how they need that you use their money, it's very tiny letters down there. You know, if you should put the glasses, because the only things that you see is a number. We give you 20,000 euros, and you see 20,000 euros, but how you apply this 25 euros is very thin. In the end, when you sign the contract and you start and you, okay, doesn't mean that 75% should use for their communities to the money go back to where they come from. So for us, deal with that. It's more problematic than deal without no fund. And strategically, to trying to be free of this money that is coming with these tiny obligations, we put ourselves as festival that for themselves or for ourselves, we already exist. Because we've got the artists, we've got the spaces, we've got all the conditions that we need to do a festival. So to deal or to talk with funders, it's always, look, either you come aboard or either you don't come aboard, we gotta do the festival. And it's gotta happen. And it's gotta be nice. And, because we work straight with the artists, and we very linked with the artist. So the crisis of deal with that, for me, it's more crucial to put them coming to our grounds, and we deal with our ground. Because the government, here the crisis when the government cut the budget, they took 10%. This is a huge problem in most of the festival in Europe. But for us, our government gives zero, like zero. Our municipality gives zero. and you say, yeah, but I do something huge for this city, and you give me 0. But stop to complain from our side. We don't complain about if they're gonna give or not. No, how we can use them. As a government, as a municipality, how we can use them, what they have that we can use. Look, we need this truck, we need that truck, we need this place and that place. You don't give me money, but you give what we need to put this festival happen in this city. It's not because you don't give money and I stop for that. No, for me, I always say that it's always teach the government, teach the municipality how they can support us, to make us important and huge for the funder to be ashamed of them to stay out of our project.
Great, thank you. It's 7 o'clock. We are supposed to be ending now, but there was a hand over there. I'll give you the final question. Shamina.
Thank you, Inga. I think this is a very interesting conversation for me, because I feel like I'm also on the other side, like when you come from a place where there's a huge amount of privilege, but still the same problems are very recognizable. I think as a person of color myself, working in a white institution in a very white country, all I ask myself is this question of how do we then stay authentic to how do I stay authentic to myself? How do I create a festival that is also for people of color, where they feel like the artist on stage is making something for them? Because we most of the time presume with all the audience that we have that they are white, that what they will see is then artists of color making something for them, and we know that they are then making something for a white audience. And this is very disappointing sometimes, because you want to invite someone and even they know, oh, I'm coming to the FTA, I'm coming to Kunstenfestival des Arts, so I know who I am making it for. And we are paying them, in a sense, as programmers of color, to not even work for ourselves, but to work for the audiences that they think that they are providing for. For me as a programmer of color, this is very hard for my mental health sometimes, because then you're like almost taking yourself out of the equation. And this was also something that I was really thinking about what Jacob was saying, and I was wondering about was also then how do we create these spaces that we know that people of color are welcome, that people of art, that artists are making things for them, that we are we then creating a festival for them especially, like where they know that everyone in the space is like-minded or even of the same immigration status, I don't know. Or are we then opening it up because we want these artists of color to really be international, make the big money, reach the big audiences? Are we using this as a vehicle for their careers, or are we choosing to actually be like, okay, I'm going to my director tomorrow and saying like, I am choosing this time that the hall is only for people that are like-minded or allies or look the same or come from the same spaces? I don't know. This is a hard discussion, which I sometimes feel in Europe is very hard to have, because then we are almost accused of racism ourselves, which is very, which is very ironic. But it is something that I'm like on the daily I'm worried about. This is very important, and now I've started like a kind of it's not secret, anybody can join, but like a programmer of color club. We call it the cute programmers club, because all of us actually are faced with the same problems. Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, anywhere. This question is not yet solved, and it's like a wall that we are always faced with, and you see people quitting after a while because they get disappointed. So I don't know if my question was clear somewhere in between. What do you think about it, and is there a way to handle it or communicate it to directors in houses to be like, okay, this is for us the way forward?
can we hold on to that question? Because I think it's a great question for us to be grappling with during the course of the week. It's a question that has to do with the extent to which marginalized communities have a right to organize themselves and to celebrate themselves and to affirm themselves in a context where they are marginal. And, you know, society kind of wants them to be integrated because society also says, but look, we are doing this for you, you know, we're giving you space, we're giving you time. So why should women be organizing themselves or the LGBTQI community be, you know, by themselves? Come on, be part of us. And I think that those are questions that we do need to grapple with because of the kind of conflicts that exist between the need to affirm communities and people and individuals who have been marginalized and have been oppressed on the one hand, versus how do we take the issues that are important to them and educate and change society so that they're no longer marginalized and no longer kind of on the fringes. So let's keep that question in mind, and there are very smart people in the room, you know, who are going to be able to maybe deal with that. I'm going to bring it to an end, but I just wanted to maybe pose one last question to our Ukrainian colleague, Victoria. You were saying you're not sure where the festival is going to be going in the future. You're not sure how things are going to materialize. And just to bring the question of funding to you, unfortunately, the way that our world seems to work is on the basis of crises and flavors of the month. And at the moment, Ukraine is a flavor of the month. Is there not the potential for you to be raising money during this particular period of being the flavor of the month in order for your festival to kind of survive and grow into the future?
Sorry. Actually, I know, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's, you're asking me basically if this time when Ukraine is basically in spotlight, you know, in news, and is it a really good time for raising money for a festival? Yeah. Did I get it right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's the question. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you know, maybe it's because it's like really midnight, and and also influenced a lot about you know, things happening actually in Ukraine, and I don't know. I mean, it's difficult for me now. You like to speak in terms of money, like, because, like, let's say money. Well, it's it was never a problem really, like for us, for our film festival, because, you know, it started, you know, not because of money. Like, it started because we were doing festival. We were just crazy, you know. People want and just happens as no matter what, and we had nothing like this in Ukraine to set up. When you start doing the film festival of this kind, then other people come and say, yes, we have money for you, or we don't have money for you, but we want to help, and etc., etc. And like, yes, that's true. Like, it's that, of course, when Ukraine is now, like, it's at war, basically, of course, we get a lot of proposals and a lot of help and a lot of support, and basically a lot of, like, embassies and international funds, they all, of course, offer, like, money. That's what's happening now. But I mean, yes, and we can also see this in a way as an opportunity. Yes, I mean that you can actually maybe, I don't know, just try to use this. But I just, it's, you know, it's, I don't know, like, the sense of this question is a bit, I don't know. Sorry.
No, I was wondering whether there was an opportunity for you to raise money and send some down to Mozambique. But listen, folk, this has been a really good panel to get the conversation going and to raise some of the questions that we are going to be grappling with over the next few days. So thank you very much for staying up so late in Berlin, Victoria, and thank you for getting up so early in Australia, Jacob. And thank you, panelists, for being here. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everybody, and also thank you to our live stream audiences. We will be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Montreal time with the next panel conversation.